Today's story takes place in the state of Louisiana. Louisiana is in the United States Deep South, a historic region of the US with a dark history. The Deep South has had deep ties to the historic slave trade, with these particular states like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia historically being heavily dependent on the plantation system, which saw black people kidnapped from their native lands in Africa and put to work against their will in cotton fields for the benefit of white Americans. Even after the Confederate States lost the Civil War and slavery was abolished, racism continued to cast a shadow over Louisiana for many years. Attempts were made to restrict free black people from voting, and racist organizations like the White League were formed in Louisiana to terrorize, intimidate, and target the black community there. Eventually, after World War II, in the face of the civil rights movement, black people in Louisiana finally begun to exercise their right to vote. And in 1960, this saw the establishment of groups like the Louisiana State Sovereignty Commission with an aim to battle racial segregation in the state, particularly in schools. During these years of segregation, it's believed that many African Americans fled Louisiana to states like California, seeking better treatment and opportunities. However, analysis by William Frey suggested that in decades that followed, due to better civil rights in Louisiana, many black migrants were actually attracted back to the state. But despite these improvements, however, Louisiana still remained a difficult place to grow up black through the 90s and the noughties. The state's incarceration rates have been at the very top in the world for decades now, and although black people are a minority in the state of Louisiana, the majority of the population in correctional facilities have been black. Louisiana has the second highest poverty rate in America, and here too, black people seem to suffer the worst. Moreover, the devastating events of Hurricane Katrina and subsequent flooding left tens of thousands of Louisiana residents stranded, with those affected being disproportionately African American. And the poor efforts to rescue these black people in danger had many people questioning if the state really even cared about their black citizens.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
Now look, you might be wondering, what the hell does all of this have to do with YoungBoy? Well, in my opinion, it's important to understand the history of where he comes from, to understand the environment that created the man, as well as the inherent challenges of growing up as a young black man in Louisiana. But that said, there's also plenty of positive influences stemming from YoungBoy's Louisiana upbringing. Despite the state's difficult history when it comes to slavery and civil rights, over the years, the state's multiculturalism would become an asset, spawning creative and artistic communities. Louisiana has a long and rich history when it comes to music. In the early 1800s, the influx of enslaved Africans brought with them a diverse array of musical traditions and talents. Musical traditions which merged with the existing French, Spanish, and Native American influences in Louisiana. The fusion of these diverse cultural elements led to the birth of unique musical styles such as Creole music and jazz. And then, during the Civil War, music would play a significant role in both the North and the South. In Louisiana, Confederate songs and abolitionist tunes were composed, reflecting the region's divided sentiments on the issue. Some people wanted slavery to end, and their ops wanted it to continue. And you could probably argue that these might represent some of the earliest examples of diss songs, with soldiers on both sides of the Civil War actually playing music that would hype up their troops and boost morale to prepare them for battle. After the Civil War, as time would go on, Louisiana creatives would continue to experiment with music. Blues music is believed to have originated in the Deep South in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The African American communities in New Orleans are credited with pioneering jazz music in the early 1910s, and in the 1950s, more new musical genres emerged, like swamp pop, where young Cajuns and Creoles would combine traditional French Louisiana music with New Orleans-style rhythm and blues and country and western music, as well as the more low-tempo swamp blues originating in the black communities of southwest Louisiana. Into the 50s and 60s, the civil rights movement would further impact Louisiana's music scene, as African American musicians leveraged their talents to amplify the call for racial equality, often using their platforms to shed light on the struggles that they had faced. R&B and soul music, with their origins in gospel and blues, would become vehicles for expressing the aspirations of the African American community. And then of course, as hip-hop emerged in the 80s and boomed through the 90s, a whole wave of aspirational southern rappers would emerge from Louisiana's biggest cities. In New Orleans, modern rap was pioneered by Master P and his No Limit clique, later being taken to brave new heights in hip-hop's bling era by the likes of Cash Money Records, headed by Birdman and his prodigy Lil Wayne, who would arguably go on to become one of the greatest rappers of all time and my personal favourite. And while the flashy antics of bling rappers might come across to some as tasteless, others would be inspired by these emerging black role models who were showing the world through artistry that a persecuted black man in the Deep South could become a multi-millionaire and build generational wealth off the back of sharing their lived experience through music. Now, things still aren't perfect, but the success of rap music in the Deep South represents a triumph over repression to me. And I'm telling you all of this because all of this history is very important context. Because the social circumstances that persisted in Louisiana over hundreds of years all led up to a single moment in time, where the perfect circumstances existed to create one of the modern day's most exciting and controversial music artists. People in Louisiana have been using their music to express their pain and tell their perspective on life for hundreds of years. And in the modern day Louisiana, one voice stands out above all others. The voice of a young boy who experienced one of the harshest upbringings modern day Louisiana had to offer. And that young boy was able to put all of his pain, trauma, and triumphs into his music. Modern day music that is still unmistakably Southern. So, now you know the city, let's take a closer look at that young boy, YoungBoy. If you found that clip interesting, please hit the like and subscribe button. And if you want to watch the full-length version of this video, check out the documentary on my main channel, Trap Law Ross. And if you want the uncut version of that documentary with 30 minutes of footage I cannot show you on YouTube, then head on over to patreon.com/traplawross, where you can watch all of my best videos completely uncut for just $2. And if you want to keep in touch and get updates on the next documentaries that I'm going to be dropping, make sure you follow me on Instagram at traplawross. Appreciate it. Peace.